Hey everybody, and welcome back to the class. We have a very full class today for a lot of information talking about our school choices. So let's go ahead and get started. And let me share my screen here. Oops. All right. So today we're going to be talking about school choices and what are our options for schools. And what we can think about is, we'll just run through the agenda real quickly. We have an icebreaker. We're going to be talking about school choice in Texas. What are the things that are available for us in Texas? There's traditional schools and magnet schools, charter schools, private schools, homeschool and virtual learning. And then we're going to talk a little bit about access and accessibility. All right. And just going back to the last week's homework, we were just going to check if you were able to find the MAP scores for your child. Were you able to get an appointment to discuss the MAP scores with your child's teacher? and also talking about your story time. Do you have that ready to go? So just going through those things really quickly, just remember next week we'll be talking a lot more about that story, and we'll be refining it a little bit more because we're going to be talking about public speaking, everybody's favorite topic. So, and Dorothy, I saw you come in. Thank you for joining us. And I know you're in a meeting right now, so no worries. Okay. All right. So, what are your educational choices in Texas? So, for Texas, we have some some kind of different options for parents. You have your traditional school, your schools of choice, which are the magnet schools. We have public charter schools, we have private schools, homeschooling, and virtual learning. So, kind of the way we want to think about it is this. So, there's like a pocket of money, like between eight to $10,000 for your child, and it's a pocket of money. It's for your child, and you can, the money isn't given to the parents. It's invested in in some kind of school that is going to benefit your children. So what we have in Texas are these options for your child, these traditional schools, the charter schools, all of those things. So we're going to take a look at each and every one of those schools, and what they're like, where the funding comes from, and what you might be able to look at the pros and cons and things of that nature. All right. Okay. So the first ones are traditional schools, right? So these are your schools that the way that schooling has existed for basically ever. It's basically based on what your zip code is, or kind of how the district maps are set up. So we have several districts in San Antonio, and it's kind of based on your zone schools, the ones that are closest to you. Um, Although it doesn't kind of always work like that because they have this weird way of like divvying them up. But this is basically the way that, I mean, you probably went to school like this. Your choice was to go to the public school, or if your parents had money, you went to a private school. So that's kind of the way that it was. That was the way it was when I grew up. And I'm assuming most of you all had the same thing. You had basically just that, the traditional school, those $8,000 to $10,000 were invested in that particular school. The state and the federal government gave money to that school, and that was your choice. It was the schools might look a little different, but they all had to have, TEA, which is the governing body for schools in Texas. Basically, they all had to follow those guidelines. Their curriculum might have been a little different, but TA basically has the same guidelines. So, the books and things might be a little bit different, but it kind of all look the same, right? All of them kind of, you went to a school, the teachers and the students were different, but a lot of the other things just basically look the same, right? People got free and reduced lunch prices. Sometimes if they qualified, they had programs for English language learners. They had programs for special education. It was a really big school. There was lots of students. So that's kind of the way that it used to look like. And for many kids, it's the same way. It's still the same way. So that's what most of us are used to. Now, the reason that I put magnet schools with public schools is because magnets traditionally are tied to public schools. They're a lot of times it's just going to be like maybe a portion of the day or a portion of the days, or it might be it's going to be with the school system. It's going to be like NEISD, SAISD. It's going to be an ISD. It's going to be tied to an ISD. Sometimes they're going to be the whole day. That's going to be a whole school, but it's usually geared to like specialized courses, specialized curriculum. I do have a little, let me see, hopefully I put the sound for this one. Let me know if you can't hear the sound.
Choosing the right school for your child
Are you hearing the sound?
Choice. Now more than ever, there are many, many options open to parents. Today, we're going to cover one of those options, magnet schools. So stay tuned for more info. Before we jump into it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Mash the bell icon and you'll get notified when we post new content. Also, if you want to hear more about the challenges faced by gifted and talented students, check out this TinyTube video we posted earlier. So what exactly is a magnet school? Most likely you live near a magnet school and you probably have heard the term before, but you may not know what it is. As the name suggests, magnet schools are designed to attract good students. They have a specialized curriculum of some sort, and they're trying to work with above average students. Getting into magnet schools can be competitive. A lot of them will have a testing criteria as well as a lottery system. So usually students will have to take a test of some sort to qualify for entry, which may have a high bar to begin with. And then they'll be in a lottery system, so they're not even guaranteed if they do well on the test of getting into the school. But fortunately, the lottery system gives all students an equal shot at getting into these highly competitive schools. The lottery system puts everyone on an even playing field, so at least you have an equal chance of getting in if you've done well on the test. There are many types of magnet schools out there. They tend to focus on a specific area like STEM, fine arts, foreign language, or even medical science. And going to one of these prestigious magnet schools can help you improve your academic performance and get into better colleges after school. So one question you may have is, how much does a magnet school cost? Well, that's the good news. Magnet schools are actually part of our public school system, which means they're going to be free to parents. Now, they may be a fair distance away from you, which would be one of the cons. The other cons is they are highly competitive to get in, and they might have a very low acceptance rate for students students that apply, their acceptance rate could be lower than even private schools. It's a highly competitive school with students from also socioeconomic classes that apply. So how do you find a magnet school? Well, the best place to start is really going to be your local school district. If there is a magnet school in your local school district, that information should be on the district website. So you can start there to try to identify the schools in your area. Also, there is an online tool called schoolchoiceweek.com. On that page, you can enter your zip code and you can search by magnet schools, and it'll show you a map with all the magnet schools in your area.
And I'm gonna go ahead and stop it here, just because it was just like a brief introduction. My dad actually was a teacher at a magnet school. He was a teacher with a fine arts school. And in that particular model, they would actually bus all of the students from that school district. They would bus them to the magnet schools, which were in Laredo. They were in downtown. So and they had to have like a little kind of audition or kind of like a profile or something the different magnet schools had different ways that they chose their students. They could have done it by profile or maybe the testing or something like that. But yeah, that's what magnet schools are. And I've even seen that here in San Antonio, they have one for construction and construction trades and engineering, things like that. So. All right, let's go back to the slides. All right.
Choosing the right school for your child is a difficult choice.
All right, and now we're to what are considered public charter schools.
No, I just want to mute it.
Oh, sorry. We are at public charter schools. So there's something like, I don't know, like I think Maribel put it for me. Oh, there's 107 different charter schools in San Antonio. And if you can see those, a lot of those are the ones that exist here in San Antonio. There's no way we could put all 107 of them. There's a charter schools in Texas are public schools that operate independently from traditional school districts. They do get the state funding. Remember those $8,000 to $10,000, but they have more flexibility in their curriculum and operations. They still have to follow the TA guidelines. They receive their funding due to their attendance, just like traditional public schools. They supposedly have open enrollment with no tuition. They're not supposed to pay, and they are still subject to TA, the way the ratings and all of that. And depending on the way that you think about public schools, sometimes a lot of people feel like, charter schools are taking away the resources from public schools, and that it can be. Some people have that idea. So I just wanted to put this little video about how they're funded and kind of a little bit more about how they work.
Welcome to County Office, your ultimate guide to local government services and public records. Let's get started. How are charter schools funded in Texas? In Texas, charter schools are public schools of choice. They are tuition-free and open to all students. Unlike traditional public schools, they can operate with more flexibility. Yet they are held accountable for academic and financial results. Charter schools are funded based on enrollment, just like district public schools. They receive state funds based on the average daily attendance of students. However, they do not receive funds from local tax revenue. Additionally, charter schools might have access to federal funding. This includes grants and programs for which traditional public schools are eligible. In Texas, charters often rely on these to supplement their funding. Private donations and philanthropic contributions also support charter schools. These can provide a significant boost to their resources. Charter schools may also raise funds through fundraising events and activities. Unlike public schools, charter schools do not receive funding for facilities. They must finance their buildings through other means, such as leasing or purchasing. This can be a challenge for charter schools in Texas. Now let's talk about private schools. Private schools operate independently of the public school system.
So I'm going to stop that one right there. And, because we are going to be talking a little bit more about private schools, but I just wanted for you all to get an idea of the way that the funding works for charter schools. I have looked at the data for charter schools because there's a lot of controversy over whether or not they are better or worse than public schools. Because again, there's always a big thing of, oh, they're taking the money away from the public schools and a lot. So, there's a lot of teachers, still public schools are still usually one of the biggest employers in a smaller town. They're usually and even in a bigger town, I'm sure with all the ISDs we have, they are some of the biggest employers in the city or town that they're in. So there's always going to be a lot of controversy over, charter schools are taking away money from public schools. And they're not even that good. And again, that always depends on the school itself. You can have some really great charter schools that do really great programs that just work out better for your child. And there's some that don't. There's some that don't, because they just the way that charter schools are kind of get started is because there's a group or community or members of government or something like that. Usually it's a group or a corporation that say, okay, well, they feel like the needs of the children are not being met by the traditional schools that are available in this neighborhood. So they want to start a charter school. They want to start a charter school with their curriculum and everything. But again, all have to follow the TEA guidelines, but they want to start something new that's a little better. And what that they feel is better. So they get together. They have to have a governing board. It's just like starting a nonprofit. They have to have all of these things in place. They have to have their curriculum. They have to have their plans, everything all together. And then they can present it to TA. And like I said, they still have to have all of their guidelines and goals and everything and metrics. And they can present it, and TA will sign off on it, that they can do that. And that's how a school gets started. It's not an easy thing, because I actually was part of a group that tried to start one in California. So and we tried to start one, but like again, it does require a lot of work, a lot of people being committed to that. And if you don't have that, it's just not going to work. So, but a lot of corporations, since they already have like the basic framework for it, are like, oh yeah, they just start them, they just start them. And maybe those are more like for-profit charter schools. I'm not sure there, but again, always, as with everything, if you would like to, if you think that maybe a charter school might be good for you or you don't know about it, the best thing to do is to actually just check it out. Because again, I've seen the data on it. Some of the charter schools do really good, some of them don't. So ultimately, what has been kind of basically what the data points to is like, well, it might be really good, but you have to do your own investigation as to what is best for your child. So one of the things that I wanted everybody to see is the reason that we're doing school choice right now is that there's actually several events going on. Enrollment actually starts now for charter schools. So they're going to be doing several different events, and I wanted to go ahead and let me stop. Let me share another one. Here we go. There's going to be an event. Um, it's called School Discovery Day, and it's going to be next weekend, the 19th. And if you register for this event, the first 1,000, I think it was the first 1,000, I remember it was the first 1,000 kids or the first 1,000 families get free entry into the zoo. And what's going to happen is that you are going, I think they said they have like 40 schools that are going to be available. So you can go ahead and talk to them. And there's some more days where they're going to be doing that, but they're all like those 40 schools are going to set up tables. You're going to be able to talk to the people, talk to some of the school staff, find out if the charter school might be something that you might like, you might want to know more about. I wanted to go ahead and I'm just going to put a little bit of this so we can just look at it.
Hemisphere. We have over 30 schools here at Hemisphere today. What's great is that a family can come and they can visit with so many different schools. It can really jumpstart their school search, and then they can come away from that with a feeling of which schools they're most interested in. They can apply to those schools. They can go on school tours and really find the one that's just the right fit for their kids.
You know, it's nice to know that San Antonio has options out there for our family and for our children's education. San Antonio Charter Moms is doing it right. You know, putting this event on and on this gorgeous day. And
it's fun. There's face painting and music, and the kids are having fun. And
tonight's out here, a lot of energy, a lot of the kids out running around. Parents, of course, getting some valuable information on what school may be best for them.
And instead of going to every single website and trying to figure out what best fits you or is in your area, you can come to one of these school discovery events and kind of see a little snippet of everybody that's all the charter schools offer in San Antonio.
A lot of people don't realize or don't understand that there's many options on the education that you give your children, but events like these really open your eyes and let you know that you can tailor it to your individual children and their needs.
Everyone's really welcoming. The moment that we walked in, we were greeted and they asked us for the first table and they were able to hand us some goodies. Not only did they interact with my son, but they also interacted with myself and with my spouse. So it was 3 different layers of communication.
I really enjoy the amount of choices that we have here in San Antonio. Each school provides something that's unique, and I love that our folks have something to choose from. So San Antonio Charter Moms, they do this throughout the year. They offer these school discovery days, and they're really great one-stop shopping opportunities for families because most of us are all 2 working income households, and we maybe don't have the time to get out there Monday through Friday to be visiting schools and meeting headmasters or principals. And so this really gives families a convenient way to explore the educational ecosystem here in San Antonio.
Events like this is what helps give parents that control over choosing how their kids are educated, what they learn, and how to build their kids' confidence so they're confident in school and they want to complete that and just teach the next generation that education matters and you are in control of the kind of education you want to have.
Visit our website, schartermoms.com, and from there they can also access our Facebook discussion group. They can sign up for.
All right, so if somebody can please put the link to this one in the chat, and you can actually register there and register for if you're interested in going to the zoo one. It's going to be, remember, it's going to be on the 19th, October 19th. And like I said, I think it's the first 1,000 kids get free admission into the zoo. Right. So what I wanted to ask you all just really quickly is how did you all feel when you saw that video about how, you know, how it feels like you're really being like somebody's competing for you?
As a parent, honestly, sorry, I feel like it's good because again, just as much as my child's important, I want the school to value that as well.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, remember there's this pot of money, you know, and sometimes it's taken for granted and it feels like, oh well, you have to, this pot of money has to be spent here in the traditional school, just like we've always done it. But actually the being able to see these things and even just going to maybe that event and checking it out really makes you see, hey, these schools are competing for, to really be the best for my child. It's kind of gives you a feeling like, hey, they're really interested, and I know that sometimes you get these people in the on the board and stuff, and blaming parents and all this, and here you are in an environment where the schools want you. They want you as a parent. And as you were hearing, some of the parents were saying, oh well, it was nice because we talked to this person and this person, and it was all these layers of communication, where it feels like in some of the schools there's barely any communication, correct? So it just I think it gives a like a good feeling that people that schools want to compete for your child. They want to be better. They want to include you in their school, so that because they know that you, as a parent, you have those choices, you have those options. Let me go back to our slide. All right.
Welcome to County Office, your ultimate guide to local government services and.
Okay. So now we're looking at private schools. And private schools are institutions that operate independently from the state's public school system. And Dorothy, I'm sorry, we started and just to let you know, so we're kind of running a little bit through this because we were actually just going to say we only had one person. So we were just saying, okay, well, we'll just record it. So if you feel like I'm going really fast, that's why. Um, but they're educational institutions that operate independently from the state's public school system. They are funded through tuition payments, private donations, and sometimes endowments. They do not receive that direct state funding. So that pocket of money, those $8,000 to $10,000, they don't get any of that. All right, that's very important to know. They're independently governed. They have a board of trustees, or maybe they're done by a religious organization. They do not answer to TA. They don't have to do anything to do with TA. They don't do STAR testing. They don't have to do any of that. They have their own admissions process. Sometimes those admission processes are very selective. They don't have to accept all students. They can set their own criteria as to what they want for a student. So they're accountable only to the people that pay them, right? Or to their grants or their donors or whatever. They don't have to follow any kind of guidelines from TA. Usually, especially if they are religious organizations that are their governing body, they have religious instruction. So they're really accountable to themselves. Some of them do, most of them, I would imagine, do have very high educational criteria. But like I was telling the people in the last class, or, I mean, sorry, not the last class, but when we had the class on Tuesday, yes, their criteria is higher. A lot of times the students, their testing is higher. Private schools always have this kind of, what do you call it? They have this reputation that they're really good, that that their curriculum is top notch and all of this stuff. What I want everyone to understand is that it's just like the gym, you know? If you're paying to go to the gym, chances are high that you're gonna go to that gym. Because if not, you're just wasting your money, right? So the children that go to a private school, their parents are paying, and they're paying not $8,000, $10,000. They're paying, $15,000, $20,000 for them to go to that school. So if I'm paying that much amount of money, my kid better be making it worth it, right? We're going to be after that student to, be turning in their assignments, to be on top of their things, because literally if they're not, then I'm wasting my money, right? So I feel like sometimes those scores and all those are a little bit I don't know about inflated, but they're skewed a little bit because you're going to have students there that are high achievers. Because again, you're paying. So you're not going to pay for, something that's not giving, for your child to be failing. Right? So that's kind of a little bit of how I feel about private schools. Yes, their curriculum can be higher, but honestly, they don't have to respond to TA for anything. So their teachers may or may not be credentialed. They may or may not have any, I don't know what education they have because they don't have to respond to anybody except for their donors and the people that pay their tuition. Whoever pays the money, that's all who they have to respond to. And here are some of the private schools that exist in San Antonio, and if you'll see, a lot of them are those religious schools, the St. Luke, St. Mary's, the St. George. So a lot of them are those religious schools. There's usually more elementary schools that are private schools, and then they all kind of funnel into one private school. I mean, not one, but a fewer private high schools. Right? And again, they have their own criteria. They have their own admissions process. They don't have to take anybody. They make their own decisions about who they want to take. All right. And now we get to homeschooling and virtual learning. I put them together because they're both basically learning at home, but they are so very different, right? Homeschool. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to interrupt before we start into this section. Just an average cost for a private school is anywhere from around, I would say, like $15,000 to $22,000 a year. Just wanted to add that. It's just good information for you all to know that it costs that much if that's something that option that you're looking for. Thanks, Liz.
So homeschooling, it's basically you as a parent are in charge of everything. You set your curriculum that you want to choose. You can create the curriculum. You create the schedule. It's basically considered a form of private education in Texas. It doesn't really have very much regulation. TA doesn't have any guidelines for it. And remember those $8,000 to $10,000, they're basically not there for your child because you as a parent have to bear all the costs for the material. It's not accredited. If you as a parent go this route of homeschooling, if like let's say your child goes all the way to high school being homeschooled, a lot of them will go ahead and attend a regular high school just so they can have credits to, for college and things like that. But you don't have to. If your high schooler, they pass they take the SATs and they take all their testing and everything. That's really all they need to get into college, and you can just provide, oh, well, he did this and this. You don't have to have grades. Really, as long as they're testing well, it depends on the university that they're trying to go to, but there are ways around that. Right? There's ways that all of those things can be documented, or you can provide proof that the child has everything they need to be able to get into a university. Okay, so that's homeschooling. It's basically you as a parent are in charge of everything, and there's actually you can actually do you can buy curriculum. You can buy curriculum that is, that'll help you, because as parents, we don't always know everything, to be able to, oh, sorry. Back. There you go.
Oh, well, I can add to that. I wanted to actually mention, like, it'd be nice to get some funding, right? If parents were to keep their kids at home and, able to buy materials and curriculum, but that's not the case. So, if you are that parent that wants to do your own lessons and learning and teaching, it is kind of on your own. There is some guidance. There is some homeschool groups here and there. You would get assimilated to. But it's really also one of those things like, are you patient enough, right? Because it just depends how many kids you have. Some parents do it when they have one child, but having multiple children, different levels could be different. But it is an option for you, and we've had some parents that have gone through the different systems, public school, charter school, and they've opted to stay at home and be their own homeschool teacher. So you can do it if it's something that you like, and we will give you resources if you need them. But it is a different way of teaching as well.
And I just wanted to share real quickly. Hold on. Let me see. I just wanted to show, like, here we go. I wanted to go ahead and just show something that you could use, like, they actually have curriculum that you can go and you can either buy, or you can have access to it. So it'll give you a total homeschool curriculum through all the different grades and things like that. So, so you don't have to do it completely by yourself. And one of the reasons that TA probably doesn't want to give that money to parents is because you can't always trust people to do the right thing. And the truth of it is that when we talk about parents doing their own schooling, and I can definitely see the arguments for it, and we'll talk a little bit once we go through virtual learning as well. The issue is that some parents would probably be graded, and I can understand definitely why they would want to do it. However, other parents, like I've been hearing, I've been reading it all this week and last week. Oh, Democrats cause the hurricanes. as if that was something that could be done, right? Democrats cause hurricane. And if you're thinking to yourself, oh, that parent is homeschooling their child. It's just kind of like, okay, so is that something that's going to be taught to them? And, it's just a thing of, okay, so what are these parents actually teaching their kids? So that's one of the things that is concerning about homeschooling, because there's no regulation, there's no oversight, nothing. Basically, the child is in your hands, and it's up to you. And whether or not there's any kind of standards or anything is, yeah, hopefully parents are doing the right thing. But you can't always, there's no way to regulate that. So I can see why TA doesn't want to give the money over to them. I would imagine that it would require some kind of oversight, and there's no way that's going to happen in Texas. So basically, that's how it is. So that's probably why parents don't get any kind of funding for homeschooling. And again, there's lots of reasons why parents would want to homeschool their children. But let me go over the other one, as the virtual learning, which is something that I think mostly everybody has already had a chance to check it out for themselves, because they saw how it was during the pandemic. It's school directed, so it's tied to school. It follows the school curriculum, the standards, it has schedules, it's considered part of that traditional school. And one of the things that it also has that that homeschooling doesn't necessarily have, is that interactions with teachers, with other students that are in that virtual school. It's led by an accredited teacher. It is accredited. So this is more a thing that's tied to actual schooling. Let me stop sharing and show the other one. Hold on. Oops, sorry. Oops.
I just wanted to say while you're doing that, Liz, I have my daughter in the car, and I just asked her, I said, would you prefer virtual learning or going to school? And she goes, virtual, because I don't have to carry a heavy backpack. And so, I feel like I wish there was a school that could also provide the virtual learning, like a hybrid, going to school some days and then also providing that virtual learning. Because I feel like it also mentally will help the student.
So you can check and see if the virtual learning is available in your school. There's also the Texas virtual schools, if it's not available, that you can do it and check and see how you can register for that. And again, these are supposed to be free because they're tied to they're tied to a school. They're tied to a public school. So I'm very glad for your for providing us some reasons that the student might actually want to go to a virtual school. Other reasons why parents might want to go to a virtual school or homeschooling. So I can see homeschooling in a place like maybe Texas, because if I'm gonna send my child to school, to a traditional school maybe, and if the school's textbooks tells me, oh yeah, people from Africa came as immigrants to help the people in the South with farming. which is an actual thing that has happened. That's an actual textbook that was in the school. So yeah, that might be something that would be concerning to me to, know that children are being taught that, slavery was actually just people from Africa immigrating to help farmers in the South, so that might be one of the reasons why you might be wanting to homeschool, is because you do not agree with the curriculum that's being taught in the public schools. And some people might go the other way, just like I said, they might be wanting to teach their children that hurricanes are somehow controlled by politics. I don't know. That's up to you. Some people would want to do either homeschooling or virtual learning because, and this is something that's new and it's growing, and I completely understand parents about this. There's so much to worry about now with school shootings. And yeah, I mean, hello, what have this been like 4 years now only? And that was very, very close. And we have very many a giant school system here, many kids. I mean, it's just so difficult to really be able to police that. And so, and all these doors and all of these things and bullying and all these things and guns, because we live in Texas, and all of these things that really lead to school shootings. Yeah, I can totally understand parents not wanting to send their kids to school. I completely understand that. All of us here that are our age, most of us did not grow up doing fire drills, not active shooter drills. I never had an active shooter drill until I went to a workplace. And here are kids 5, 6 years old doing active shooter drills, and that's pretty scary. I completely, I am totally on board with parents saying, no, I don't want to put my child in that situation. That scares me.
Yeah.
And as a child, I know that that's scary for the kids too. I don't know if any of you all's kids have talked to you about that, but it's scary. I that you have to buy, that people are looking into buying bulletproof backpacks. That is completely frightening. Yeah. So I can totally get parents that say, you know what, I just don't want to send them to school. I don't know if it's ever going to happen or not, but I just don't want to even mess with that. So that was one thing.
I mean, I want to add there a little bit, just because I think it's very fair. I think the culture and the atmosphere that we live in now is very different than when most of us grew up in the schools. And so it's good to know that you do have options. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody can access those options, right? I mean, some parents might want that option, but they work all day, right? So they can't have their kids at home all day. It's also costly, right? Like if you have your kids home all day, well, they're going to be eating all day long as well, right? School typically provides a free lunch. I think everything comes with its pros and its cons, right? And it really also depends on you as parents, what you feel is the best fit, the best method and access that you might have at the moment. And even if it's like trauma, right? Because a lot of us, even coming out after COVID, hesitated to send our kids back for another couple years, right? So it really depends, but I also think it's good to know your choices. That way you can choose the right fit for you and for your kiddos, depending on where you are at in this moment. So thanks, Liz. I appreciate those pieces.
Yeah, and there could be other things too. When Veronica and I were talking about this particular piece, and she was asking, well, why would parents not be wanting to send their kids to school because her daughter is very social. Le estoy diciendo, Verónica, que tu hija le gusta mucho, no le gusta estar en casa. Y ella le gusta socializar. So it's a social aspect. However, some children are the complete opposite, and they have a lot of bullying, or maybe they have a lot of social anxiety, things of that nature that make it hard for them to be in school and make school, especially a school that has a lot of kids in the class, a lot of sensory stimulation, a lot of things like that. Maybe your child has special needs, and they get sensory overload if they go to a regular school. That might be one of the reasons why you might want to have either do homeschooling or that virtual school. And virtual school, if it's attached to a public school, is usually free. If it's not attached to it, then there might be some cost to that. Okay. Also, you have to have good internet access, and you have to have a computer and all that. So all of those things also rely on the school themselves, because I know of some programs that will actually give you a laptop, or will lend you one for the duration of the class. So it just depends. All of them have different different ways that they do things. It's just a matter of exploring your options for that. I think one of the things that, again, the differences between homeschool and virtual is tied to an actual school. Homeschooling is like, it's a kind of like a free-for-all, because sometimes all you get to see is the pros of homeschooling, because we do this, we do that, and the kids do this, and I have complete control, and I'm teaching them. But however, the pros are that not everybody is not everybody is as committed as they should be, because it's a lot of responsibility. Not everybody's responsible as they should be. I mean, if sometimes, because again, it's your own schedule. So if mom wakes up at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and that's when they start school, well, and okay, well, it's 3 o'clock, so let's be done with school. How much of instruction are they actually getting? And again, it also all depends on schedule. Maybe for me, I would always fall asleep after lunch. So it's like basically all that time that I was, I would always be like asleep at my desk or something, because I just wasn't a good person during the day. It wasn't that I wasn't a morning person. I did get up in the morning, but I've always had problems sleeping. So I always had to have a nap sometime during the day. So if you have, children like that, maybe they prefer being able to have their own schedule. It just depends. That would be for homeschooling. For virtual school, they have a schedule. So it's those are kind of the differences. And
there is, I want to mention a school that just came into town. I don't remember exactly the name. I'm gonna look for it right now, but it's around this part of town in the west side, and they have night school. So they have a day session and a night session, or evening, I guess I would say. So children, or I guess young adults, can choose if they prefer to go in the evening versus the morning. So I thought that was pretty cool. And that's kind of the one of the bonuses from charter schools, is they can adapt as needed and make it different. And so I thought it was pretty awesome, and I'll find the name for you all.
For me, the first, I once had a job with Nationwide, and I was working the night shift, and that was the first time ever in my whole career that I felt like, oh wow, this is a shift that actually works with me. So,
and I think you got to think about that. I don't think we think about that for our kids, or even us as we're growing up, right? Because there is people that don't like the mornings. Like I mean, there's just people that cannot function well in the mornings, and it's okay. And I think because we try to conform our students to what should be, like I guess I'm a rule breaker. I don't know, but I'm like, don't conform me to anything, right? Like I think we should always have options that work best for you and your situation. But I think we've just been conditioned that school is at 7 in the morning to 3 o'clock, right? Like that's just the way that school is. But I appreciate thinking through the lens of like, well, what if that doesn't work for me? A lot of people work in night shifts. A lot of people work in evening shifts, right? So I kind of like having options, and I like that some schools are doing some of those that thought work. But that is also a good option for a homeschooler, right? You can do learning in the morning, take a break, do something in the evening, right? You're flexible with your schedule, where at schools or public schools, traditional schools, they're not as flexible.
Yeah. And I think it's an important thing because this has been since I was a little girl. My dad can tell you, I, I was like 11, 12 years old, and I was moving furniture around. Like they'd wake up and the furniture would all be moved around, and the house would be all clean and everything, because that's when I would want to do things, is at the night. So, those are things that are helpful for because we think, oh, they're little kids, they don't know what's best for them, I think. But that's the way our body works. And again, this is since I was a very little girl, I used to do this. So I'm thinking, well, this is the way my clock is. I don't know. I'm sorry. I can't do anything about it, but that's just the way it is. So now
I can agree, especially, sorry, not only to interrupt, but I can agree only because since right now I had my daughter, now I just dropped her off at school, and she's like, look, this is a perfect time for me to be going to school. And I said, cállate la boca. I'm sorry, you're just lucky because you had physical therapy. I go, but she goes, but again, she goes, when can we decide when we want to go to school and the time? Because she goes, and it's just like you guys said, not everybody, she's not a morning person. She dreads the morning. I'm waking her up at 7, and that's me even giving her extra time to sleep. And it's like, okay, Alexis, it's already 7:30, let's go. And she's like, oh, 5 more minutes. And I'm just like, yeah, I already gave you that 5 extra minutes. So now you have to get up. If you want your tacos in the morning, because I dread the mornings too, but I'm already like, okay, let's go. Vámonos. Yeah. But she's like, see, and so I feel like maybe if she could go in at this time, like 10 o'clock, 11, her grades would probably be even better than what they are now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I could tell you at 7 o'clock, like for elementary, I believe you can start dropping them off at 7:30. Like that's crazy. Like I think some people get adjusted, right? But some kids just don't. And some kids are still waking up when you're leaving them at school, and they're like trying to figure out the breakfast and like getting their motor running, right? And by the time they're like good, like I know I can tell you my son that has a disability, that's why he goes in at 9, because he doesn't really get started till 10. Like, and that's ideal for him. Like his best time of learning is from 10 to 1, and that's exactly when he comes back home, right? And so I think if we could adjust that, that'd be wonderful. I've heard a lot of students ask for flexibility on their time, like going in at different times or different shifts per se, right? There's like a morning shift, there's a middle day shift, an evening shift. I think it would take a lot for schools to change that, but I think the more that schools are doing, like charter schools are trying to do some kind of a schedule change and collect data that shows that it could be beneficial, could ultimately have some impact, right? But again, the way that we are going to change like everything in a bigger effect or impact is when we all start organizing and asking for those things collectively, right? Individually, it's like a tree in the forest that falls, right? That like nobody's gonna hear it. So it's like one of those things where let's collect data, let's or push for new charter schools with these new things, right? Because we can do that. We as parents can say, we live in an area where the schools are terrible and there is no new charter schools. We need one here. And you all can rally, and there is groups that will support that, right, to bring in new charter schools. that have you in mind, right? That will include you in the process. So if that's also an alternate option, but know that those take years. You know, sometimes it takes years for them to even from the beginning of proposing something new for it to actually happen. It'll take several years, and by that time, a lot of us as parents we've moved on, right? We're already past the elementary,
Right.
we're already going into high school, right? And you know, we wish those things were there when we were there, but we kind of miss the mark. And it always is kind of missing the mark for a lot of parents, but we always have to think future, right? Future forward and thinking about, you know, our grandkids or our kids, right? And what are they going to be being able to have access to when they have an education as well. So thanks for.
Right. Because I mean, we kind of tell them, like, I mean, I tell my daughter, when you get to college and university, no, hombre, you'll love it because you get to set your own schedule. You get to pick what time you want your classes. Then you get to pick your professor. And she's like, no, hombre, I can't wait. And then now, like, even she's like, I can't wait to go to college or university. And then she's like, but wait, that means I have to grow up. I'm not ready for that either. And I'm just like, you have to, it's like a pick and choose for her.
I was just wanted to say, so when my daughter went to school in Laredo, she was still little. The bus would pick her up, no lie, at 6 o'clock in the morning. The bus would pick her up at 6 o'clock in the morning. She was in kinder. So that meant she had to get up at 5:30 in the morning and to get on the bus by 6 o'clock in the morning. And she was in kinder. And
Wow.
that just seems like a ridiculous amount of time for her to to be away. I mean, she was in kinder. So it's just, you know, things that are like seen as acceptable because it's a public school system. So that's what we do.
Hmm.
But
Or that's what we get, right? I
yeah,
was the same way. And until I realized like, well, no, that doesn't work for my son and that I could be the voice and I can also change his IEP plan.
yeah.
And before it was like that. It was pitch dark when they would come pick him up. He'd be on the bus for an hour. And that was like, no, this is not going to work, right? So then you realize you have rights, that you realize how to use your voice, and then you adjust the schedule as needed. And that's where we're at now. But if we wouldn't know, there's still lots of parents that their kids have to be in the bus ride for like 2 hours without an aid, and they need an aid, and they don't know they can ask for it, right? So it's just really about knowing your rights, your choices, and your options, and exercising, you know, your advocacy to get what you need for your kids, and knowing what they need too, right? That's why you guys are the most important um, person to advocate on behalf of your children, because you know what they need. You know what their preferences are. You know when they function the best. And so knowing all of that gives you the shared and lived experience that you can share that out with somebody else and say this is what will work, right? And that's why you're valuable and your stories are valuable.
All right. So now we come to the portion where we talk about school vouchers. And these are things that we don't have them in Texas yet. As long as Governor Abbott is still in Texas, as long as he's still the governor of Texas, you can bet that this is going to come up every year because he's big on this. He's even convened special sessions for Congress for them to consider the school vouchers, but we can talk about that a little bit more. Let me just go ahead and put this video. Now, this video is very general about school vouchers. That's what I wanted, is to how they operate, how they got started, and all of that. So how they operate in different states, because again, Texas doesn't have one.
School vouchers are a big, controversial idea that President Trump and Education Secretary Betsy DeVos both support. Some 15 states offer them, plus Washington, D.C., which has the only federally funded voucher program in the nation. A traditional voucher program lets parents choose where to spend some or all of the money a state would have spent on their child in a public school. That includes taking the money to a private school or even a private religious school. And that's why critics have argued that vouchers violate the Constitution's Establishment Clause, which says that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. But in 2002, in a 5-4 split, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that Ohio's voucher program was constitutional. The court held that the government was not choosing to spend state money in religious schools, parents were, and that made all the difference. Today, the majority of states still do not have voucher programs because their state constitutions have what are known as Blaine Amendments. These specifically prohibit the use of public dollars in private religious schools. Now, Blaine was a Republican lawmaker in the late 1800s who pushed this idea at the federal level. Now, he failed, but many states still went ahead and added the language to their state constitutions. Voucher programs vary a lot from state to state. They're generally limited to low and middle income students or students with disabilities. Ohio, for example, has a voucher dedicated exclusively to students on the autism spectrum. These programs often give students less money than the state would have spent in a public school. This is true in Indiana, which has the largest single statewide program in the country, now serving 34,000 students. Now, supporters of vouchers say they're a kind of social justice, giving low-income students access to schools they couldn't otherwise afford. Meanwhile, voucher critics argue that too often these programs divert public funds to private schools, and that in some programs, private schools are actually allowed to cherry-pick students, turning away low performers and even kids with disabilities. As for the research on vouchers, it's been mixed. There's limited evidence early on that some students benefited from a shift to private schools, but more recent studies of programs in Louisiana, Ohio, Washington, D.C., and Indianapolis have shown voucher students actually losing ground, in some cases significantly. One potential benefit of vouchers shows up in multiple studies. It's a slight improvement in the performance of nearby public school students, though, of course, that only helps the kids who choose not to use vouchers. Our team at NPR Ed has spent the past few months looking into some of the nation's oldest and or largest voucher programs. Be sure to check out our work at the link somewhere near.
All right. So, looking at
my head. School vouchers are a big
So just looking at the plan that was and again, if it's Governor Abbott, he's going to try and introduce it as often as he can. The plan that was introduced in 2024 would have provided families with around $8,000 to $10,000 per student per year to use for private school tuition or other educational expenses. Now, they've never been able to pass the vouchers, never. And they've introduced it several times. He's pushed the Texas State Congress a lot for those vouchers, and it's never passed because Texas is a very rural state. There's a lot of areas in Texas where a public school district is the only thing around for miles. Yeah, maybe they'll have a small private school, but they don't want to have those monies going to that private school because there's only like one public school. They want that money to go to that one public school in the area. So I doubt that it's ever going to pass, but let me tell you, Governor Abbott has really pushed for those things to pass. He, like I said, pretty much I feel like every year they try and push a bill through. It's gotten close to passing, but it's never done that. And it's just going to be opposed all the time because Texas is a very rural state. It has a lot of open space, a lot of places where there is not very much in the way of school choice. So traditional schools are always going to be the ones that are going to be that there's a lot of fear that money could be taken away from those traditional schools, especially when you live in a place that barely has any schools to begin with, or you have to be bused 5 miles to get to that school. So that's kind of where vouchers are and how they work. I don't know if you had anything to add, Maribel.
Yeah, I did. I just want to say, like, because I know there's a lot of misconception about charter schools taking money away, but the reality would be private schools would take the money away, right? Like, I think it's one of those like I feel like we're always being tricked by the system, right? And you should be aware of like how to understand the real issues, right? By digging into the news, and I think a lot of this is politics as well. Um, but if you really think about this money, right? Let's say that this, because they will push it again. We had I would say a scare last time, and what happened, like, and I'll give you just like a quick rundown of what I understood, because I don't understand politics that well, but I do think that it's important for you to know how this money can impact or have an impact in education, right? So when we think about what happened last time, they introduced these vouchers because the governor didn't get what he wanted on the vouchers for people to support it. Then he stopped and said, well, we're not going to move any further, right? So then we're not going to vote on any other funding until we vote this thing in, right? So essentially they will hold hostage other things, because what happens in bills is that they put so much stuff into a bill that it becomes like all these things, not just one thing. They don't just vote on the voucher. They vote on the education package, right? So if they are like not getting what they want, they will stall, so then nobody gets funding. So what happens in the long run is that the funding for special education doesn't get through, we don't get enough, or it doesn't get voted on because it didn't get voted on because the voucher didn't get the support, right? So it's so layered, right? So I think it's important for you to know like where this is coming from. It will come back again, right? Unless he's out. And the way that the government frames that these vouchers are supposed to help us is that pobrecitos, us, right? The parents that don't have choices, and you don't have a chance to go into a private school that's so good, we're going to give you this $10,000 so you can go into the private school and get the education your child needs. And it sounds really great in theory, right? I think it's like I would take it if I could. But I also know that it doesn't just cost $10,000 for my child to go to school. It costs $22,000. So what's going to happen when I run out of money, right? Because maybe that's only going to cover a bit of it. So I think a lot of parents, it sounds good in theory. They're giving you this money. You get to go try out a good school or what you think is a better school. And when you get there, it might not be everything you imagine, but once you use that money has been taken away from your public school system as well, right? And so when you're kind of left with nothing else, you're going to go back to the public school system to know that there's less money than there was because now everybody used it in vouchers, right? So it's kind of one of those things that you need to know about. I see Aggie might have something. Go ahead, Aggie.
Yes, I wanted to say that you're right. It's giving these parents an opportunity to put their kids where they think they're going to get a better education. But remember, a lot of our kids are already behind. So are these private entities going to work double? I mean, it's not going to be that easy to get our kids in because some of these kids are very, very behind. And then, of course, you're not looking at the special ed services. You have to go outside to the public schools to request that you get these special education services brought to these private schools. But I wanted to just share a story with you. Back in the day, back years ago, when they first tried to bring the vouchers in, I was one of those parents that went over there in a bus. We had like a bus, and we were there until 2:00 in the morning because they put us at the very end to speak, and they thought, oh no, pues este mexicano se me va a agüitar, excuse my Chuco language, but and we stayed there to speak, and honestly, I think that's something that's a possibility that we're not voicing our concerns as parents up there where it counts, Maribel. We're not voicing our concerns or sending in these letters, and that's what needs to happen.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That addresses like the entirety, right? When we want to change something that will cover a mass, a lot of people have to show up. And I think that's the challenge that we have. We have the challenge to find the people that realize that this is not just an issue in their school, this is an issue across our city, across our state, because it takes a different level of parent to show up there, right? And we know that. We've been doing this work for a couple years, and we also know that not everybody's wants to be there or can be there, right? They feel like that's not their moment now. And those that are will show up to do and stand up, right? And run for and be a part of, right? And be all those leadership roles that we need to. I think we're slowly still building that army, Miss Aggie. And I think I say it in that way. And every time I think about the way I say it, I'm like, man, I sound so like tactical and like an army. But the reality is that we need to create an army of parent leaders that want to go and do this work and know how to speak on behalf of the work and how to like organize on behalf of the work and protest on behalf of the work, right? Because one thing is saying stuff, the other one is doing actions. And it's hard to do an action, right? Like if we say, you know what, nobody sends their kid to date, nobody. That's hard. Even though it sounds really like, I know I would keep my kids, right? But for a lot of parents, it's like, no, espérate, right? No, espérate, no sé, no sé. But it's like, no, like when we talk about getting people to that point, it takes a lot for somebody to say, you know what, I'm doing it for the greater good, right? And I'm going to do it because we need to make a point and we're going to make a point, right? And I think we can get there. It's just taking some time to find those parents that really want to action and get other parents to encourage them, right? So it's kind of like this little tree that we're trying to build. I will call you, you will call Melody, Melody will call Belinda, right? Like, you know, it just becomes that. And I think that's what we're trying to build, and we've been trying to build for quite some time now. Thanks, Aggie, for sharing.
Thank you. And the reason that we wanted to put vouchers there is even though the plan still has never been they've never passed them, is because like I said, as long as Governor Abbott is in the governor of Texas, he's going to push it. He's done so much that has really, you know, been very clear to me that this is something he really wants. I mean, if Congress is in session, he's going to have somebody introduce that bill because he really wants it. And again, just like you saw in the video, these states all have their own way of implementing them. And some of them sound really good, like the one that I think it was Indiana that was specifically for children who had autism or something like that. Okay, so, but again, every state gets to dictate how it's going to work and who the money is going to be for and all of that. So it's all about looking at the fine print. Even if you're like, oh, maybe I kind of agree, you have to look at the fine print because it might not benefit your child at all, because they might not be they might not be eligible for it. So you have to look at the fine print for how the bill is going to work in Texas. All right. So back to our screen. Back to our slides. And I just wanted to ask some questions. And number one, who did you know that all of these choices were available to you? Who knew that all of these choices were available to you? That you had so many options. Maribel says she knew. Aggie, Dorothy, did you all know you had as many options?
I have to rephrase though. I did until after I started digging into this work. I didn't know when I first started sending my kids to school. So I do have to rephrase, right? I know now, I didn't know then.
I didn't know we had 107 charter schools here in San Antonio. That's crazy to me. Aggie,
I know pretty much about them, but I really feel that if you're gonna have vouchers, it should be like you said, like Indiana. It should be for those special needs, those students, because a lot of times our school districts cannot provide the proper resources or the proper education or whatever the child needs, and it would be nice if you can take them to a specialty school for that. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, because I like with mental health, things of that nature, sometimes you have to go somewhere else to get those
I think
services.
there's one, right, Maribel, one for special needs.
There is. I was gonna even say, like, it'd be nice first to have the options. We don't have options, right? We have one, and even the one that is in Edgewood, right? I believe it's Burleson. They still don't accept everyone, right?
Exactly.
There's still issues with accepting all. So I think as we're doing this work, right? Because this work not only is for you all to be empowered, but it's also to find the best fit for our kids in education. It makes me wonder if we need to start thinking about activating to bring in specialty charter schools just for the needs that we are seeing that are not getting the services appropriately. Could be that there's a specific school for autism. There is a couple of schools out here that are autism based, but they are private and you do have to pay. And yeah, you have to pay. So maybe what we need to think about is a different method of bringing in a charter school that's focused on an area. Or we can just make a private school and get those vouchers. I'm like, look, if the voucher thing happens, like there is an opportunity there as well, right? Like, why don't all the parents that want to start a new school put in their voucher money towards a private school that's for their benefit, right? Like, there's no restrictions against private schools or how you're like gonna make it. All we need is the funding, and we will find the teachers to teach our kids, right? So there's options, right? Let's say like it does pass and it's not the end of the world, then let's use that into how does that benefit our kids, right? So there's options. Just saying, I don't think we have enough options now to service our kids. And you mentioned something I want to bring up, which is at private school, our kids are behind. And even if it's special needs, right? Like I would never consider taking them to a private school because you need extra additional services that you additionally have to pay for in a private setting, right? And so even if you had the 10,000, tutoring will not come free. Tutoring will come outside of your pocket, right? So you need to still be able to afford for those additional services that traditional schools like public schools have to provide you through FAPE, right? And so but it's kind of like we're like knocking our head in every wall, right? It's like, okay, then send them to public school, yet there isn't the qualified expertise there. So it's kind of like, what do we do with our kids? Like, what do we do with the kids that need the extra help? They're not receiving it in public. We know they can't get it in charter, and it's really difficult in private, right? I think that's where we're at now, is finding the best solutions, given that we don't have great solutions right now. Yeah. Facts.
So, the next question I wanted to ask you, let's say that you had zero obstacles. It didn't matter about money, didn't have to worry about the distance, transportation, anything. If you could choose just the best option for your family and you had no barriers, nothing, you can just choose which one would be the best option for your family, for your kids. What would you choose? Would you choose a charter? Would you choose a private school? Would you still go with a traditional? What would you choose? And I'd like for everybody to answer it.
So what would I choose if I had a choice?
Yeah, if you could choose whichever one, it didn't matter.
Public or, I'm sorry.
Of any of the options we have.
Private, public charter, any of them.
And then
Yeah. Well,
I would choose hybrid.
You would choose hybrid? Dorothy said she would pick hybrid.
Like hybrid option, virtual and in person.
Yeah. I would choose public. I mean, I'm all about public, but I would choose public. I don't know, because that's really all I've known, to be honest with you.
I would choose a charter school. I'm gonna be honest. Like I think I looked into charter schools before, um, because I like that they're not traditional. I mean, I'm always a fan of doing things different. Not that because they have a higher quality or not, that depends on the school and the teachers and everything that's in it. I just like that they're not bound as much by being traditional like a public school because I feel that even though I'm a public school graduate, right? I graduated from public school and I felt like I did get a great education now that I'm reflecting back, right, and seeing what I'm seeing now. Um, but I actually went through a magnet program and it wasn't in a public school, but the magnet program, it was outside of the box. You know what I mean? So I feel like charter schools are a little outside of the box. So if I wouldn't choose a charter school, I would definitely choose a magnet program because they have just different experiences, right? And to me, I'm always looking for something that's not something that's been there for like hundreds of years because I'm more about like that's things change. Like we cannot stick to the same old, right?
My,
So that's me. That's me.
I'm trying to think of the type of school. It starts with an M. Mazda,
Montessori.
Montessori.
Montessori. That's what I would choose. Okay. And the reason for that is because I've really kind of looked into that. They do a lot of hands-on with the kids. That's what I would do besides public school. The reason that I'm not really into charter is because I live close to a charter school and I've heard that they're having some problems. And then they're saying that teachers don't have to be certified. So, the charter schools has already brought kind of like a little fear. I mean, you're right. It's different, but it's still I still feel kind of funny about charter schools. And because I feel that they don't accept every child. But I would go for a Montessori school.
Yeah, and I guess I'd pick it because also I don't feel like they would accept my like they would like a charter school if I would go in there and say Wuzeki's gonna come in here. Yes, they would, but I don't think that my son would be picked out of a bunch of other kids, right? Like I think that they want to keep their ratings up. They want to be seen as a good school, and I don't think my son would ever give them that status because he's not going to be in the same category or level, right? So I think that's why I picked that, but because I know that's not an option for me. Like it's not an option for me having a child with special needs in a charter school. It's not an option for me to have him in private school. That would be way more expensive, right? And so there's just not a lot of options for families that have like severe needs or even like struggles, even in reading. Like I think everybody at this point is just struggling in general. I think no matter where you're going to pick, there's a lot of factors as a parent that you're going to have to consider, right? Culture, academics, and just really is your child functioning in that setting or not, right? And Montessori, just so we can be clear, can be a public school. Some public school charters have Montessori themes within them, and there is also charter schools that do that as well. So there's a lot of options.
Verónica, so ya que viste todas las opciones de escuelas, ¿qué te gustaría para tu familia si pudieras escoger cualquier escuela que has visto?
Pues yo estoy contenta con la pública
Okay.
porque he encontrado cómo ayudar a la niña en las materias que le hacen falta, pero mi pensar es que la escuela no el niño es el que tiene que aprender, la escuela no hace al niño, el niño hace la escuela. Pero algo que sí he echado yo de ver es que cuando un papá le pone atención al niño, el niño progresa. Cuando uno no pregunta cómo te fue, qué hiciste, qué entendiste, qué te faltó, nosotros como padres siempre damos por sentado, ya fue a la escuela, ya aprendió y ya puede seguir adelante. Pero hay veces que nosotros no preguntamos a los niños. Entonces, todas las escuelas son buenas, todas se acomodan según al niño o el niño a la escuela. Pero yo pienso que lo más recomendable es que los padres estén más atentos a lo que pasa dentro de las escuelas, en la educación que llevan los niños y qué es lo que están llevando los niños hacia su casa y hacia su mente, porque Nosotros podemos escoger a lo mejor la mejor escuela por tecnología, por mejor calificación, pero no sabemos si lo que a nuestros hijos les hace falta es más atención de parte de nosotros, como para saber qué es, en qué nivel estás, qué te hace. Yo lo digo porque, por ejemplo, yo con mi niña me dicen, en lectura estás bien, pero ya después le digo, a ver, vamos a ver escritura. Y escribe horrible, dijo Maribel. Una pata de araña ahí por ahí regada nada más. Ahora ya me enfoqué yo aquí misma en moldearle la letra y ahora ya puedo decir que de hace un mes para atrás ya la A, las letras ya son como más específicas. Entonces, Liz, yo para mí es la pública, a lo mejor la privada sería una opción buena, pero no está a mi alcance. Pero si yo le pongo más empeño a lo que el niño estudia, yo pienso que el niño va a salir adelante y la escuela también se va a beneficiar porque pues tienen alumnos mejores.
So I'm going to because when again, just like when I went to school, there was one choice. That was it, just the one choice. Um, so, but if I would have gone to school, um, I would have preferred if it would have been up to me and there was all these options available. I honestly would have probably preferred like a virtual school because I was a very introverted person and I didn't know it at the time, but it was a lot of very much sensory overload. I was very quiet in school. I got bullied a lot. So school was very, especially elementary school, was very hard for me. I don't think up until I got into high school and I got into theater arts and different clubs and things like that, did I feel a lot better. But I just had a really difficult time in school with the other kids, with a lot of the bullying and also a lot of it, and I didn't know it at that time, but there was a lot of sensory overload for me. So, that's for me, that would have been the best thing. My daughter is a very social person. She went to school in California. They're great schools. Public schools in California can be really great schools. She went to a really good school. And again, being a very social person, traditional public school was great for her. She loved it. She loved her schools. She was very happy. She was one of those people that would be very sad if she couldn't go to school. She loved going to school. So I think probably for my grandson, I would have enjoyed, I would think that maybe, not knowing his personality yet, but I definitely am intrigued by those charter schools just because you can choose. You can choose different schedules, you can choose different things that they focus on. Again, just like everything, if you have 107 charter schools here, I'm pretty sure you can find one that really suits you well. And that's what I like. I like having the ability to choose and to choose something that I want. So, and I also like that in charter schools, they're still accountable to TA. They still have to meet the guidelines. There's still some oversight, which is not something that that private schools have. It's not something that home schools have. So I really like that oversight. Virtual school, for me, I was a very self-disciplined student. So that would have been probably a good thing for me. I didn't need to be social. I didn't want to meet other people. That was fine with me. I was fine not meeting because as far as I was concerned, the other kids kind of hated me. So, that for me was fine. So that would have been a good thing for me. So it just goes to show you that depending on the child and their individual personality, it different things can be better for different children. And that's just the way it is, you know.
Well, I do want to add, I think you bring up a really good point that we didn't talk about, but a long time, right, as we've been navigating kind of school choice, because I did go to a public school in choice school in SAISD, which was Young Men's Leadership Academy, and it's all men, right? There's an all women's, there's an all men's, there's a Montessori, you have a lot of options even within your public schools. I remember it being really difficult to change later versus in the beginning, right? So I think that there is a very, very grand opportunity for families to explore their options in elementary school when the kids are not so tied to their friends, because then that becomes an issue, right? I know for us, when he was going into for middle school, I chose to do a different path for him. So he was not going to follow his friends from the neighborhood. He was going to go somewhere else. And I didn't let that become an issue. Like, we started even practicing, like, oh no, we're gonna go somewhere else, right? So he wasn't gonna get comfortable and say, I want to about my friends, again about my friend. Who cares about your friends, right? I'm like, no, we need to think about what's gonna be better for you, right? And so it gets harder as they get older, because I could tell you right now, if I told him the other day, oh, we're gonna switch you. We played a joke on him. We're always joking on my kid, but I told him, oh, by the way, they finally accepted you at Advanced Learning Academy, and you start next week, right? And he was like, no, I can't, like, right? I mean, he's in high school and he has all his friends now, so he was like devastated. And we were just kidding, but we were on a waiting list for such a long time during COVID, and never heard back, right? So I think it's one of those things that the earlier that you want to try to test out how things work, right? You can do that. Just know that you have those options. We're not pro or against or anything. We're pro-choice in general. Like, we want you to know you have choices. We want you to know that you can exercise those choices at any time. It doesn't have to be at a certain, at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year or whenever. No, you can choose whenever. You have the ability to take out your kids and put them in a different school if they will accept you. But know that you can go visit schools, you can go tour schools, you can go ask questions about, the parent involvement, communication, meet the teachers, right? So there's a lot you can do. From this session, I want you to take away that choices are good, right? Even though they might, in a stigma, be seen as bad for public schools. It's good that you have options when the school that is your school is not giving you what you need for your kids, and that you're able to make that choice to put them somewhere else and investigate and find out, right? So thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to kick it back to Liz.
Thank you. So if we're, again, looking at, this was just, what option would you like if you had no barriers whatsoever? But unfortunately, and in the next two slides are also going to talk a little bit about this, is there are barriers. Even though we have all these options in Texas at this point in time, we do have those barriers to being able to choose those options. And what are those barriers? And the first thing that I think of is, like, the San Antonio is freaking long. It is so big. And if I'm here near Woodlawn, and the school that I want to go to is over there on 151, and how many miles is that? And so how am I going to get over there? And what if you had two kids, and one of them is going to a school closer over here in Edgewood, and the other one is going over there to 151? How are we going to get those over there? Can anybody think about any other types of barriers that might not, that make some of these choices inaccessible to you?
I can jump in if nobody else will. Uniforms are one thing. Some charter schools require you to buy full-blown uniforms with embroidered logos on them, which are very pricey, because I used to go to that magnet school and they actually required polos with that, and they were about $30 each, and he needs one per day. So yeah.
Wow. Anybody else? Can anybody else think of any barriers to go to that might, that maybe won't let you choose the option that you think would be best for your child?
Me again, me again. Just because we were a part of the school discovery days, and realized that when the schools are there, they don't have a person to translate. So another barrier could be language access. They might not, like one of the top rated schools was Bases, and if you go to their table, they're not going to speak to you in Spanish.
Wow. In San Antonio? Wow. Okay. And that leads us to our next slide, because just because you have options doesn't mean you have access to those options, because there are barriers to those options, right? Access being the ability to be able to get to what you want, whether it's a school or anything else. How am I going to get in? Is it accessible? What are the barriers? So just because you have all these options doesn't necessarily mean that all of these options are available to you. And again, talking about homeschooling and virtual schooling, like, okay, well, is somebody going to be at home with a child? If you work, then that's not a viable option for you, correct? Unless if you're going to do homeschooling at night when you get home, and then how are you going to be feeling about doing that after you've worked a full day and then you have to homeschool your child? So it's, again, just because things are available doesn't mean that you have access to all of these options, right?
Yeah, and transportation is one of those big ones. I think when it comes to charter and private schools, a lot of the funding, the misconception is they're taking the money away, but it's not in totality. So a lot of our charter schools don't get enough funded or enough funding. So they have to eliminate things like transportation, which always makes it difficult. For a while there, I tried to pursue like a via somehow to get with via so that they could provide free transportation for families to exercise their option. But it's just a whole other beast with the city for them to provide free busing for students. But I don't think it's impossible. I think if we want to give those any family options and take away some of these barriers, providing free bus transportation from the city would be ideal. It's just one of those things that we need to push with as a majority, if that's something that we want.
Yes. I mean, I know that when my roommate was a Lyft and Uber driver, he would take kids to school. These are minors getting in a car with, essentially a stranger, and he's taking them to school. And I mean, that's a little scary. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. We're just trusting that a stranger's gonna be totally, yeah. And granted, these guys have to go through background checks and everything like that, but I mean, you just don't know. You just never know, especially when you're putting your child in a car with a stranger. It's just, you never know what could happen, right? So, especially your options are even more limited when you're below the poverty line, because at that point you don't have transportation, right? Most of them won't have transportation. Either they won't have cars, or they won't have working cars, or they won't have cars with insurance. Sometimes they will not have money for the uniforms. They won't have money to participate in the school activities because, of course, here we are, you're always selling popcorn and cookies and chocolates and everything for the school. So those can definitely be barriers, especially if you are below the poverty line, because when you're there, sometimes you won't even know that there's a Discovery Day at the zoo because you don't hear about those things. You don't know. Maybe you don't have access to the internet. Maybe you just, those things are just not things that that information does not get to you. So you wouldn't. So those schools are free for you to go to, and you do have the option to go to those schools, but you don't even know that they exist, right? So in a system of options, the people below the poverty line still have no choice. And I want to talk we're going to talk a little bit more about that, because in the next slide, I'm going to talk. So just a question for discussion for those of you that are still here. Public schools have largely, it's the one that's the most recognized way of doing school. We had them in existence for centuries now, and they're the only schooling available in rural areas. So what do you think is the impact if parents have so many choices now? What do you think the impact is going to be on public schools themselves? Does anybody have any opinion about that? What do you think would be the option? What do you think is going to happen if there's so much choices for public schooling?
I would say that students would actually like to go to school if they had their own choice to choose which school they want to go to.
There's going to be more competition for students. Can you imagine going to that Discovery Day and there's 40 schools competing for your child, for your child to be placed there, right? It's going to be like, wow, and they're gonna play it up. I'm sure they're gonna, talk about how much better they are than the public school. And I mean, hey, I mean, it's gonna make a difference, especially for if you have, if you are trying to do things in your own school and that the school district itself seems to not want to be communicating with you, and here you are, you have all of these choices, and these charter schools really seem to want you in their school. I mean, what's going to happen?
Yeah, and I want to add just that thought, right? I think we don't think schools compete for our kids, but they do, right? Because attendance matters and enrollment matters. And I want you all to think about when we get the most calls from our school districts, when it's time to enroll for next year, right? I've had calls from my bus driver. I've had calls from the lunch lady, because when they don't have anything else to do and it's time for enrollment, guess who's going to be calling? Anybody in the district that can call, right, immediately. And so they will want to compete for you. It's important that you know that you should be the savvy consumer of education, right? You should go shopping for schools. That is your responsibility, right, as a parent, to know like what is out there. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know all the schools because there's so many. So we talk about 100 and something charter schools. Well, guess we have 18 something districts here in San Antonio. And that's just districts. Within each district, there's a ton of schools, right? So there's hundreds and hundreds of schools in San Antonio. I don't claim to know them all. But what I do claim to know is that I've visited schools in the north side, and they're very different than the schools in the south side. And I think it's something worthy of you all seeing, because I think even though we might not get exactly what is over there in the north side, you also realize that what we're getting is not the greatest, right? And then you should look for more, right? So I think if anything, I've realized like there's inequities in schools. Like they're not all created equal. There is different funding streams for all schools. But you see some schools that have a gym with a swimming pool and they have all the like the beauty like I and you'll see it in athletics. If your kids are in athletics, right? I go to swim meets and all the Northside kids have these like parkas and these beautiful jackets, and then I'm like, wow, where's your jackets? Y'all are just like naked in your shorts. Like, what's going on, right? I'm like, what? Because they have money to get those things. Our kids don't. We're using hand-me-downs. We're like, it's just like whatever cap you got, kind of stuff. Where over there, everything's logo branded, like, it's fancy. But you wouldn't know that if you're not visiting those schools. So I'd say it's a good idea if whenever you have a chance, go visit a charter school. Even if it's just one. You've heard of IDEA so much, okay, go find out what it's about. When I went, I was like, okay, I know what it's about. Is it fit me? No. Does it fit my son? No. But now I know why they have a rigor or an A because of the way that they do their work, right, with their kids. And so you will see size limit, like of classes, right? They have like a smaller size limit of students in each class. I would just say take it upon yourself to go visit. You might not get that from a school discovery day because you should have some questions, right, for you to think about. It's better if you visit a school because then you'll really get the idea of what they're about. And so that could be an extra additional challenge that you all should get. Or even if you don't want to go visit a charter school, go visit a public magnet school within your district. Go visit Burleson. Go visit the fine arts school. Why are they different? Right? And I think that would give you a better understanding of your options.
And I think one of the things that I would imagine it would happen if, as people know all of the, can you imagine if every parent knew all of the options available to them, all of the options that they had, if all of every single parent, English and Spanish, knew what the options were available for them. They were able to see, there's competition for their child to place them in their school, and they were able to see all that. I would imagine it's making public schools pretty nervous. Yeah, because I mean, let's face it, SISD had to close schools. Why? Because there was low enrollment, right? Why was there low enrollment? They had lots of reasons, supposedly. People moved from the area. Housing is no longer viable in a lot of areas for a lot of people in San Antonio. So people moved out of the area where they were at. And people are not having kids as much anymore because kids are pretty expensive. And also school choice. That has a lot to do with it. Parents know, many parents now know that there's lots of choices available to them. And yeah, where some of us are old school and this is how we were brought up with just a traditional. But honestly, for me, when I'm thinking of, when I'm looking at these different charter schools and what they offer, that seems pretty intriguing to me. And I want to find out more about it, right? And as more younger people are growing up, they're getting more used to all of these options available to them, which is going to lead to lower enrollment and could possibly lead to the school closures because schools are now, schools were used to being the only game in town and now they're not. Yeah. So it's a thing that could happen. I actually saw the report that was done, the equity report that was done for SISD. I actually read through them. I can tell you this, and again, this kind of has, this is a little bit off topic, but information is your friend. So just kind of just throwing it out there. So, when SISD closed their schools, and they closed a lot of schools, and they closed, I think it was like 4 schools in District 2, which basically left it a school desert, is what they call it. It's kind of, District 2 already has a food desert. So now they're going to also have a school desert, So basically that means that there's just basically not enough schools to support, the people that live there. But anyway, there was, of course, a lot of people very upset about it, a lot of parents, a lot of staff members that did not want to have their schools to close. And they wanted that equity report to be made, that audit. And so the audit was made. And this is what I can tell you about it after having read it. So this was an audit that was made to examine, I think the last school closures were in 2014, 2015. And again, they gave the same reason, lower enrollment, and it would be better for the kids, blah, 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 right? And all of the parents said, hey, if my kids are going to do better, ultimately, okay, it's going to be better, right? They closed the schools. Some of those schools were pretty old, and it was going to cost a lot of money to refurbish them. So I get that. I understand that. Some of them were not. And it just was the thing that the amount of kids that existed in the school versus how much the school was costing them to stay open. I guess those things were, they just didn't go, oh, I'm looking at this 1204. Sorry, again, just gossiping kind of a little bit, but just so one of the things that came out from that equity audit that they did, and again, they gave this to parents, and parents had 1 month. I don't even know like if it was actually distributed, or they just said, oh, we're making it available, or who actually had that information. Like if they just said, oh, it's available, and I don't know if it was, if people were in charge of finding themselves or what. But they gave parents 1 month to read a 52-page document, and it was only available in English. That was one thing. But two things, I did read it, two things that jumped out on me. They said, they asked a question, okay, when the schools were closed in 2014, 2015, did this have a good, was it a benefit to the kids? Did it work out for them? Blah, blah, blah. The answer was no. So they found out, they did all the they looked at the scores, at the STAR scores and everything, and they actually found that the kids did worse. Some of them fell behind, some of them were able to catch up, and some of them were never able to catch up. So the overall, basically, was, if the question is asked, did it benefit the kids to be able to close the school? The answer was no. So that was one of the things that I found.
Yeah.
So this was not a benefit to the kids at all. Not really.
Yeah, and I want to add to that list, because I think a lot of it's like a must, right? They had to close the schools. They don't have money. A lot of parents were upset. I would be upset. You don't get first pick of any other school. They were just going to shuffle you wherever they wanted, right? And then to know data that says that can impact your student, right? That a lot of students didn't come back. And that's their own fault, right? For not being transparent in the beginning and not really having like an open conversation. So I think there's a big piece here of transparency. I think we're all lacking from school districts on what's actually happening and the impact it's going to have on our students. But I think one of those things is right. Like if your child has had to move because they had to and they closed the school into another school, it's a new system, a new teacher, their friends might not be there, right? The impact that it's going to have on you as a family unit and your student is going to be large. And we are not going to really see the effects of it until after that first year. And then we're going to see how it impacted the students academically and their families, right? Because then the families are going to be like, forget this, we're going to move. So we're going to start seeing some big numbers coming up this next year. And I also know, because there's a lot of Edgewood community in this class, that Edgewood is also seeing that closures as well.
Yeah. So they also found that the absences had increased significantly enough to note that it did have a negative effect on the students. But I think it was like only 10% of the students that were actually going to be impacted. So it was I guess to them it was like, oh well, it's negligible. The other thing that jumped out at me, which basically said, well, they were going to do this no matter what. It didn't matter what it said in the equity findings because they were going to do this, because by doing this, they were able to save almost $48 million. So basically, it was a money thing. That's all it boiled down to. It was a money thing. They honestly, I don't know that they really cared that much about what was going to happen with the kids, because they were going to save $48 million and they needed that money. And that's the way it worked. So again, not necessarily something that gets into, what we're talking about today, but just kind of like a little information sharing. And for anybody that wants, that equity report is available and accessible to anybody who wants to see it. And like I said, I don't know what they were doing, but the people that did the equity report were pretty upset because they said this is something that takes us like 6 to 8 months. These audits take 6 to 8 months because there's so much data to look at, and they gave them 3 weeks to do the audit. So
Well, and that I want to say that audit came out in the board meeting, and they requested like it's a 6-month to a year audit. So they were just trying to get it done because of just to have data. But even in that quick turnaround, it shows that the data is not was not in the favor of our students.
Yeah, it did not support that. So back to our slides. We're almost done. I'm sorry that it's been. Okay, so final announcements. If you, Maribel, if you would just want to talk about the calendar a little bit. Maribel. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, did you point it to me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Final announcements. Sorry, Deli was calling on the other phone. But yes, just some quick reminders for you all that are here. We are having a movie night on Sunday. Just a reminder, our kids do not go to school on Monday. It is Indigenous Peoples Day. So we decided to go ahead and do something in the evening on Sunday. If you guys are free, come and join us. You don't have to stay for the whole time. It is a sensory-friendly movie night for our kids in theme because it is that time of season in October, and we will be watching Coco and making some mini nichos that you can take home with you, and your kids would be able to do that with you. So this is this Sunday. Let us know if you're coming. You can RSVP, you can scan the code, you can text us. We just want to know a little bit of a count if you plan on coming in. Let us know. I would say text me or put it in the chat if you're able to. If you are going to be able to come. And then we also have if you haven't gotten our newsletter went out the first week of October. And it's right here as far as all the classes that we're hosting for the month of October. We're already on the 10th, so this first week is done. Check that off your list. Next week, if you're wanting to see us in person, you have 3 opportunities. October 13th, which is that Sunday, for movie night here at the offices. October 16th is at Mirasol, and we do empowerment classes there in person at 10 to 12. And then October 18th, we're going to be at the Alazan Community Center and doing empowerment classes there as well. Usually we do a little recap of all the other classes that you guys have attended to, but it's a little different because it's in person. And then the last weeks of October, this 22nd, you'll do the Academia en Español. On the 24th, you'll do the English one with Liz. And then October 23, we have our special education support group, which you guys are always invited. Want to make sure you know what's going on. So that's kind of the announcements for now. And then today, in case if you're around Alazan Community Center, we're going to be handing out raspas with Big Mama's House and the Brown Berets, and just to get people kind of used to us and for them to come into our spaces. So if there's anything that calls your name, please let us know that you'll be coming, and we hope to see you at any of these events. Thanks, Liz.
Okay, and last one is the exit ticket. Somebody can post the link on the chat, so you can just do your exit ticket and we are done. Is